I'm Zach. We're continuing my Malazan studies today. Gardens of the Moon is one of my favorite things. I think it's a fascinating text. I think it's a beautiful book. My reading of it is hyper focused on this idea, this theme of being possessed. I think that Gardens of the Moon is a fantasy story about being possessed by gods and empires, and they are both raging inside of you. In short, I think that Gardens of the Moon is an exploration of autonomy, of a lack or a loss of personal freedom, and the many different myriad ways that different sorts of characters respond to having their autonomy challenged, weakened, or broken entirely. I think it's most poetic in a character like Lauren. Adjunct Lauren is my favorite character in this book. I am absolutely obsessed with her. I have a few videos dedicated just to her and her story. Her behavior throughout this book fascinated me, captivated me, spellbound. I was enraptured, loved her, thought it was a very tragic way of expressing being possessed by the state, by empire. But I think that this theme of autonomy, this theme of the fear of possession, is found in almost every part of this book. That's why I think that Gardens of the Moon is about being possessed. Even the title, Gardens of the Moon, the gardens are the possession of the moon. Like, I think everything about the book is about being possessed, about your autonomy being challenged. And maybe the harshest truth of this book explores the idea that autonomy is a fallacy, is impossible, and that I'm pretty deep into Dead House Gates. And it seems to me that Erickson is kind of saying that fatalism, whether it's poetic or not, is the barbaric truth. Sorry, or Apsalar is another excellent example of this. Probably the loudest example, the most self-evident example. This fisher girl being possessed by the rope or by Cotillion, by an actual deathly assassin god. And the trauma felt once the god leaves. The phantom pain of the possession itself is fairly evident in Gardens of the Moon. It's beautifully done, actually. I do like the Apsalar character a lot. I think even the main story of this book is about autonomy, about the fight for it, about the fear of being possessed, about the kind of death sentence of being possessed, and like this slight secret that everyone is possessed by something that will lead to their doom. Darujistan, the city that is at the center of this book that the Empire wants, that Lorne is going to die in order to try to claim for the Empress. Darujistan, that's a whole story about autonomy. Darujistan wants to remain the last free city. Darujistan doesn't want to be part of the empire. Darujistan wants to remain autonomous, sovereign even, wants to remain autonomous. And I think it's fascinating that through Darujistan, we can explore like the worthiness of autonomy, because Darujistan's not like this mecca of enlightenment thought. It's, from what I can gather from what we read about, full of thieves and assassins and prostitutes and lowlives and crooked politicians and cheating, scheming lovers. You know, it's a city full of manipulation, games of manipulation, of class systems that just seem so unfairly designed. Yet we're supposed to sympathize with Darujistan simply because they're trying to keep their autonomy. We are given a cast of colorful characters, of course. We're given like Croup, we're given Cole, we're given Rallick and Crocus and Chalice, all sorts of colorful characters, but they're all kind of colorfully flawed and explicitly criminal. The bridge burners are kind of granted the illusion of autonomy by the end, and they have to go to the very edge of sanity in order to receive that. Within Darujistan, we get this war over autonomy even on an emotional level. Crocus is this young, kind of reckless and impulsive yet skilled thief whose entire worldview is snatched by the beautiful vision of Chalice Diarol, a crush that he has that turns quickly into a loving obsession. His entire worldview is snatched. His entire physicality is snatched away by love. Then again, the flip side of that coin, that is Crocus the coin bearer is that in Gardens of the Moon, he might be the one character who actually enjoys personal freedom. At least from gods and from Empire. You can say it's possibly through Crocus's ignorance or his naivety, but he doesn't ever really know that he's been selected by Opan to be the coin bearer and be extraordinarily instrumental in some divine scheme. He doesn't even know that. He's unaware. The end of this book is beautiful with Crocus asking Callum, like they're on a boat, and he asks Callum, do you believe in luck? And Callum scowls and says, no. And Crocus says, neither do I, and flips the coin into the sea. Crocus was able to hold on to his independence from both gods and empires. His primary concern was Chalice Jarl. So maybe Steven Erikson is saying through a character like Crocus that, you're going to be ruled by something. You're going to be ruled by politics, by religion, or you're going to be ruled by love and emotions and friendship or criminality, by crime. You get to choose what dominates you. You get to choose what you sacrifice your autonomy for. And it's the naive ones. It's the lovers. It's the ones who are embarrassingly in love that seem to possess the greatest amount of self-rule and self-ownership, despite being absolutely noticed by gods and empires both. He feels incredibly unlucky because the love he feels for Chalice is unrequited, but he doesn't even know how lucky he truly is. He never knows that Lorne's about to kill him. He doesn't even really know that Opan has selected him as a primary feature of this magical clusterfuck that is happening within Darujistan. He doesn't even know how truly lucky he is because he's so focused, so devoted to his own adolescent narrative systems. Crocus is really cool. Like, every character is really fascinating. You can spend a lot of time on many different characters. Autonomy is explored on an emotional level throughout this book. And without leaving Darujistan, we can obviously focus on Cole and Lady Simtal. Two wonderful examples of autonomy, of Lady Simtal like using her gifts in order to scheme her way to the top of this caste system, and in doing so destroying Cole's. So by fully realizing her personal freedom, had to completely diminish Cole's personal freedom, which is like a cascading effect, because then you get Cole's friends like the assassin Rallick or Murillo, who use their personal freedom to crush Lady Simtal's reputation, to crush her soul, to crush her spirit. I think it's very clear that Gardens of the Moon is a book about autonomy and a book about being possessed by gods and empires. If there's one message that this book makes beautifully clear, one word of advice, it's never get noticed. Never get noticed, boy. It's about the dangers of getting noticed by gods, by empires. And in Paran's case, both of them. We're going to be looking at the Malazan wiki, trying to see what we can learn about Paran's role within Gardens of the Moon. And I'm only going to read the parts from Gardens of the Moon, and I'm going to be very careful not to get any spoilers, because as I said earlier, I'm pretty deep into Dead House Gates, so I am simply like very, very, very early in this series, and I don't want to get spoiled, but I do want to study Paran, because the way that Paran handles being challenged by the state and by gods, by having his autonomy challenged by states and by gods, is through anger, aggravation. He is absolutely pissed off about it. And I had a comment on one of my videos, like, I gotta take time out to say, wow, Malazan fans, you guys have found me. A couple of Malazan fans have actually found my videos, which is astonishing to me, considering that I'm not in any sort of algorithm, especially for fantasy book analysis. But some of the Malazan fans are like so dedicated to Malazan that somehow they found my videos, which is really nice. And a few of them have said nice things under my videos. And in one comment, um, someone was talking about how Paran is really interesting, like agreeing with me and my ideas about autonomy and all sorts of stuff like that. But I, I'm paraphrasing, but the commenter said something to the effect of, and Paran's also interesting because he's kind of set up as like this chosen one archetype, and Gardens of the Moon is a pretty beautiful deconstruction of that. The commenter also says that Sorry, you're the Fisher girl. Apsalar is also set up in a similar sort of way, and it's very true. It's very true. Paran is set up as this kind of chosen one hero archetype. But it's not as if he doesn't get to fulfill any of his archetypal obligations, though. He is in like the end. He does play like a pretty significant role throughout the piece, but he's playing all these significant roles like in spite of himself. Like he doesn't want to. He wants to create his own destiny, hence being a noble, hence trying to be a soldier, trying to carve out his own destiny. And every step along the way, either empire or gods are interfering with his personal freedom. Yet this interference leads to Paran ultimately claiming victory over race, over both gods and empires, right? Because he keeps the gods from interfering. He keeps the empire from successfully sacking and claiming Darujhistan as well. But it is fascinating that Paran is this kind of deconstruction of the chosen one archetype, and so then we can kind of hold on. I guess I have to ramble a little bit more, wax poetic just a little bit more. So I guess we can kind of extend our thoughts about autonomy and about possession, right? About having your soul and body hijacked by gods and empires. We can extend that to kind of like a meta level with Gardens of the Moon, involve a bit of a postmodern analysis here. So if all of these characters are kind of on this like narrative track within this familiar narrative system, which is epic fantasy, many of them are being interfered with by gods and empires, but also obviously by the author himself. So we get these kind of clearly defined archetypes. You get your chosen one within Paran. Lauren, I love her to death. She's also like a pretty clearly identifiable archetype, and they're each being interfered with by the deconstruction of the frameworks of the fantasy genre itself. So even if they were to follow it like in a paint by numbers approach, that would be a complete lack of autonomy. So in ways, these characters are also battling for personal freedom within Stephen Erickson's prose. And I think that Stephen Erickson is very conscious of that. And it's just very beautiful. It's a very beautifully constructed book. Gardens of the Moon might be the most fascinating fantasy book that I will ever read. So we're going to go over Paran's wiki. I'm going to chime in with some thoughts here and there. And we're just going to have fun and hopefully kind of get a better understanding, or at least like a funner, deeper understanding of Gardens of the Moon, because I think you can the way that the reader is kind of just dropped into this dense world, as an analyzer, you can just drop into any part of the book, and there's thousands. There's a limitless amount of ideas to make videos about when you're analyzing this book. In 1154 BS, Genoas Paran visited Malaz city for the third time in as many years with his father, who was negotiating with harbor officials about the island export tithe. Whilst Paran's father was negotiating, Paran ventured out to the wall of Mock's hold and observed the riots in the Mouse Quarter. Oh, shit. I didn't even realize that. That's what was going on then. Oh, God. Oh, God, that's beautiful. Hold on. Hold the phone, motherfuckers. Really? Okay, the riots in the Mouse Quarter, that's what shaped Lorne, right? That's what created the villain known as Lorne. So while in the prologue, in the opening, Paran is looking over the Mouse Quarter riots, and the creation of Lorne is there because that's where Lorne's entire family was killed because of Tattersail's totally irresponsible and overzealous early command. Right. So like, oh, at that moment, it's like a convergence of all these different characters. I just didn't remember it was the Mouse Quarter riots because that meant nothing to me in the prologue. Right. It wasn't until later and I didn't connect the dots in my head. That's amazing. So Paran and Lorne are kind of being born at the same time. This reluctant anti-hero and this reluctant antagonist are being born at the same exact time. Oh my God, that's awesome. And then Tattersail and Whiskey Jack and Fiddler all there. What? That's so cool. Whilst watching the distant flames and smoke, he met Whiskey Jack, Fiddler, and Surly. In his discussion with Whiskey Jack, to the older man's disapproval, he mentioned dreams of soldiering and grandeur, where he imagined himself a hero, and commented that he did not believe the world needed another wine merchant. At the time, Paran noted that Whiskey Jack seemed young, and that Fiddler was not much older than his own 12 years. However, Paran's false assessment at the end of the prologue about the source of the smell must be taken as a pointer that at that age, his judgment wasn't necessarily accurate. I would argue that Paran's judgment is never necessarily accurate. If there's an unreliable narrator in Gardens of the Moon, I would... I mean, I think we could trust most of them, but if there's one we could trust the least, it would be Paran. You know, I do think he's kind of self-obsessed. You know, I think if he had a character flaw, it'd be self-obsession, but or self-possession, like wanting to actually possess his own self, but it's constantly being invaded upon, hijacked by gods and empires. You know, it's awesome. 7 years after the events in the prologue, I still can't get over that was the Mouse Quarter riots. So little boy Paran and little girl Lorne are turning into fantasy archetypes at the same exact time. And there's a connection there. Oh my God, that's awesome. 7 years after the events in the prologue, Paran was newly stationed in Itkokan. As a graduate of the Marine Academy's Officer Training Corps, he had reached the rank of lieutenant in the 8th Cavalry. After volunteering to lead the inspection detail, he was charged with escorting Adjunct Lorne through the Itkokan massacre, which had been initiated by Amanas and perpetrated by the Hounds of Shadow. Adjunct Lorne assigned Paran a commission on her staff in order to continue the investigation into the massacre. Paran's first assignment was to make inquiries in the market town of Jerome, or Garum. Once again, I can't pronounce half these words. I've only read the books. I haven't listened to audio. I haven't watched any videos about any detailed videos about Gardens of the Moon, so I've never heard these names really vocalized before, so I'm sure I'm saying them wrong, but that's fine. He discovered the aftermath of yet another slaughter. Paran then returned to Unta, escorted by Topper by way of the Imperial Warren. I kind of liked Topper. He had a kind of flamboyant vibe. I liked him. Didn't get to see him very much, but I liked Topper. To report his findings and met Surly, now Empress Lysine, again when he and Topper exited the Warren in the Hall of Throne. Like, dude, that's so cool. Lysine, she has the funnest archetypal role in this series so far, because like her ghost, her shadow, the imprint of the Empress, the presence of the Empress is just hanging over this entire, at least over the first 2 books so far that I've been reading. It's almost like the fact that she's practically a non-entity actually makes her the largest presence in the entire series. Paran was ordered by Adjunct Lorne to rejoin the Officer Corps in Unta to continue his training until such time as she would need him again. Working with the adjunct, he became accustomed to being used. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. And as we've analyzed in our previous videos about Lorne, Lorne was grooming Paran to replace her. Now, she could have been grooming Paran to replace her so that she could get away from Empire entirely, or, as I'm kind of positing, like, this is the idea I like more. I think that Lorne is secretly suicidal and self-destructive and careless about her own life, and is possibly grooming Paran to replace her so that she can finally die. By the 1163rd year of Burn's sleep, Paran ranked as a captain and was dispatched to his new permanent command with the bridge burners of the Second Malaz Army. The details of the assignment were conveyed to him by Topper, who arrived on board the Imperial Trireme by Imperial Lauren around the time of the final battle at Pale. The top secret part of Paran's mission was to deal with the possessed young girl, Sari. Like, that's what, like, Gardens of the Moon is just so fucking beautiful, because all these different people are possessed by a variety of different things, kind of clashing and interacting with each other. Like, a bunch of people possessed by gods and empires interacting and clashing with each other. Topper told him that it was feared that Sari might have corrupted the bridge burners and possibly Dujek One Arm and the entire Second Army. This was Paran's second encounter with the Claw, and in both encounters, the two men parted on bad terms, with Topper accusing Paran of being arrogant and discourteous. I mean, he's not wrong. And then, of course, he meets up with Tok the Younger, who's a character I adore. I love Tok the Younger. He's very fun. To be fair, my favorite thing about this book is Lorne. So I think that most of the characters who interact with Lorne, even if it's just for a short while, they are improved in my mind. So I loved Tok's moments with Lorne. I think he was there for some of the most interesting developments within her character, and I liked seeing it through his perspective. It was very nice. Then, of course, Paran was attacked by Sari. Well, killed by Sari, right? Paran, however, retained life through the intervention of Opan. The deal between Opan and the gatekeeper included that someone close to Paran would die an early, meaningless death. Paran also encountered Shadow Throne and two of the hounds after Opan had left and managed to persuade the Master of Shadow that he would be better served letting Paran go. Paran was then found in Pale over an hour later by Picker and Anstey, taken by Quick Ben, Callum, and Mallet to recover with the mage Tattersail. And then we get into Tattersail and Paran's romance, their brief whirlwind romance, even though the word whirlwind has a bit of a different connotation now that I'm reading Dead House Gates, but still, the descriptive remains. Hairlock is another character who I think is overtly symbolizing this theme of possession, considering that he's possessing a marionette. And what kind of value do I see in the love story of Paran and Tattersail? Well, I don't see that like impassioned value. I see like something undeniable between the two of them. I think I see within Paran like falling so heavily for Tattersail so quickly is that like the act of making love to Tattersail, the sleeping with Tattersail, is like tantamount to an act of rebellion against Lorne, because it's at that point where he's like, Lorne has been lying to me. Lorne's going to kill all of the bridge burners. I'm sick of Empire interfering with me, and now I got gods interfering with me as well, and this sword called Chance. I've got interference on all sides. I'm going to express my personal freedom by sleeping with Tattersail. I'm going to express my personal freedom through this act of impassioned, romantic, erotic rebellion. And I guess you can say that that's impassioned. You can say that it is actually passionate and full of love, considering how deeply Paran wants to rebel against the forces that are the forces of interference, right? So, like, based on that, we can definitely say it's very passionate, and maybe even more passionate. The more I'm thinking about it, maybe I am being drawn to the relationship because it actually is passionate and full of like a tender affection, a tender meaning, because it might be one of the only things in this entire book that he does of his own free will, of his own personal freedom. And it's this kind of, but then again, it's kind of like the way that the part is set up in the book. It's like neither of them can resist the moment. You know, it's like they're both like under this undeniable spell. And of course, I think that all of us have been in romantic situations where that has been the case. You know, those moments are really rare, not taking anything away from it, really. It's just that when we're analyzing Paran, I think we have to remember that most of what he's doing that seems within his personal freedom, I think is ironically outside of it. Like everything that happens to Paran is a deception of autonomy. right? And most of what he does is like a rejection of the narrative that he's on, a rejection of the forces that are interfering with his personal freedom, with the forces that are kind of puppeteering him. You know, he's in that room with a marionette possessed hairlock, right? But he is the true puppet. Paran is the true puppet. And I think we have to deal with Paran in an ironic way, in a way where we never lose sight of he is, I think, specifically designed to be the chosen one. As the commenter on one of my videos said, like, we can't lose sight of that everything is a deconstruction. So everything is kind of ironic or subversive when it comes to Paran, including his pangs of the heart. Then Paran and Talk went out. After Tattersall left for Darujhistan to warn Whiskey Jack about danger from Lorne and her Talani Moss. Oh, Lorne and Toole are so much cooler than fucking everybody. I don't care. I don't want to hear it. They're the best. Paran learned from Talk the Younger that the danger was possibly greater than anticipated, and he decided to follow her, with Talk insisting on coming along. Talk is like, in Gardens of the Moon, he's like the best sidekick for every character he comes across. Love him with Lorne. I love him with Paran. I love him briefly when he interacts with Toole. I love Talk. Talk is just so cool. Whilst traveling in pursuit of Tattersall, they were waylaid by the puppet Hairlock, who sent Talk into a rent. Like, Talk's still alive, right? Like, I know Paran thinks he's dead, but I think that Talk is still alive. There's no reason why he shouldn't be. I don't know if you kill people by putting him into a rent. And also, if he was dead, this wiki would say who killed Talk by sending him into a rent, not who sent him into one. But I was already pretty confident in thinking that I would see Talk again. I'm still pretty sure I will. And in the comments, please don't spoil anything. I've been very clear about where I am in the series. Don't talk about anything beyond. Well, really, in this video, don't talk about anything beyond Gardens of the Moon, because maybe there are other people who haven't read more who are trying to fully appreciate Gardens of the Moon or just clicking on this video. So in the comments, don't talk about anything that happens after Gardens of the Moon. But I think that anyone reading this book, Gardens of the Moon, can kind of surmise that Talk probably isn't dead. I love that guy. He better not be dead. The puppet's attack on Paran was interrupted by the arrival of the Hounds of Shadow. The Hounds, Gear amongst them, killed the puppet. Then they turned their eyes on Paran, who was saved by the opportune arrival of Anomander Rake, who slayed 2 of the Hounds with his sword, Dragnipur. That sword's interesting, right? I think we're going to get into that sword in a minute here. Literally get into that sword. After Rake's departure, Paran dipped a hand in a hound's blood and found himself within Dragnipur, unchained. He briefly spoke to one of the sword's prisoners before helping the hounds escape by tricking them into a portal to the Warren of Darkness. This theme of autonomy, like, that's literally what this book is about possession, about being possessed. He goes inside of a sword and sees all who fell to the sword, chained up. They are possessions of Rake. Even less than that, they are possessions of a possession of Rake. They are possessions of a sword that Rake carries. They are completely without freedom and separated from time and the physical plane. Like, this book is the most comprehensive exploration of personal freedom and the impossibilities of personal freedom that I have ever read. And I've read some of the fucking most intimidating philosophical texts, like Gardens of the Moon. Stephen Erickson does it way better. Way better. Like, it's so fucking cool. Like, this theme is just transferred to everyone. The reason I love Lorne so much is because her behavior within this kind of psychological maze of personal freedom, that's the behavior that I found most captivating and most relatable, honestly. And I found her electrifying, shocking to be around. That's why I love Lorne so much, because I think she best expresses this theme, this, I think, primary theme of Gardens of the Moon. A couple of days after freeing the hounds, Paran encountered a herd of Badiran and was attacked by a youth as the herd passed. So this is when he realizes that Tattersall is now inhabiting this girl within this tribe, right? Which is another case of possession, another case of being possessed. Soon afterward, Paran encountered the injured Cole. I love Paran and Cole together too. You must be sick of me saying, "Oh, I loved that," but it's fucking true, man. I loved every part of this book, Gardens of the Moon. Paran offered to accompany Call back to Darujistan and let him use his pack horse, sparing the injured man a ride on a mule. The two men shared a campsite and over a bottle of wine exchanged life stories. I love those parts of this book where we really get to feel out the dynamic between characters. Because that's what I like almost most about fantasy books when compared to other genre works or even literary fiction, is that since so many different quests are happening and there's so many different characters, of course they cross paths, and I like to see the experimentations with dynamics, and that's when we get really great ones like Tool and Lorne, or like Paran and Cole. I like to really kind of absorb the dynamics of these different characters and the way they interact with each other. They get into Darujistan. This gets its own fucking paragraph, this one sentence. Adjunct Lorne admitted to herself that she had been attracted to Paran and regretted losing him. Okay, let's not fucking... Why? Oh, God. Why does this get its own paragraph? It's not like that much of a point. Like the amount of things we're leaving out, we have to like include that without engaging with it at all. I think sure there was an attraction, there was a chemistry, but like when you read Stephen Erickson's thoughts on the subtext of Lorne and Paran, where Lorne was grooming Paran to replace her, and then my further analysis of it, where I think that Lorne was suicidal and wanted to die, therefore was grooming a replacement so that she could finally die. I think she was attracted to Paran because within Paran she saw death. Within Paran she saw her own, her only getaway, her only way to get personal freedom, either by having Paran replace her so that she could abandon Empire entirely, or I think, which is more likely, having Paran replace her so that she could finally die. She was attracted to Paran because Paran represented personal freedom to her, because Paran represented an escape. And I think it was a deathly escape. I think it was suicide. I think Paran represented suicide to Lorne, and that's why Lorne was attracted to him. In all sorts of ways, erotic as well as violent ways, that she was attracted to him. It's way deeper than just being like, oh man, I lost you to Tattersail. Like, fuck off. No, Lorne's really complicated. Paran told Whiskey Jack that Lorne would be dropping off something, however. The sergeant told Quick Ben that Lorne had not done so yet. From a conversation with Callum, who said the squad was still clean, Paran possibly expected some kind of tracking device. When Paran arrived in the garden of Lady Simtal, like, and this is all possessions, all possessions, all possessions, all things possessing all things. During the fete, he felt there was something very wrong with it, as if he was with a primordial presence. He and Callum came across the former Sorry, standing in front of a strange wooden block which seemed to be growing and the source of the wrongness. Sorry professed vague memories of having killed Paran, and the captain went to get Mallet to take a look at the strangely changed girl. I love this strangely changed girl. She's getting through Deadhouse Gates. She's becoming, I'm becoming more and more affectionate to her. Mallet found that Sorry was no longer possessed, however, also detected another presence. Paran advised him to give that presence help to heal the girl, and the healer agreed. Paran witnessed as Callum, representing the Malazan Empire, agreed a contract with the Assassin's Guild mistress, Vorkan Radok, for the elimination of the Turud Cabal. Paran suggested that it was unlikely that Animander Rake would directly oppose the Empire forces. First Paran, and then later his sword, were tools of Opan. Isn't that fucking awesome? Isn't that crazy? Isn't that beautiful? When he felt his luck had turned, just before leaving Darujistan, he gave his sword to Cotillion. To replace Chance, he took Adjunct Lorne's Atatarl sword from her after her assassination. At least that sword lives on. Then it's Memories of Ice. We're not getting any spoilers here. Man, I love this book. I think it's so rich, so multi-layered and multi-dimensional. I can't read about that Atatarl sword without just wanting it so bad. That sword's so cool, man. Like, we're looking at him as a deconstruction of the Chosen One. But in the end, he does he does act appropriately within those archetypal definitions. He does help save the day, and he is a pretty vital component of that final showdown with Race and the Finest and Crocus's uncle possessed once again. And of course, the Raced, who is possessed by some sort of like ancient vow, is determined to find a finest, like this acorn type thing that Lorne had hidden in a garden, searching for a possession that would give him his full power. Like, everything is about possessions. Everything's about being possessed. Everything's about gods and empires interfering with autonomy, with personal freedom. Guardians of the Moon is beautiful. And we can look at characters like Paran. We can look at characters like Lorne. We can look at characters like Sari and Absalar and Hairlock and all sorts of them. Every one of them, probably. And we can get a unique sort of view of autonomy on a psychological, on a philosophical, on a sexual, on a fatalistic level. Lorne responds to the interference of gods and empires by, I think, searching for a way to die, by searching for suicide, by trying to get herself killed. Absalar responds to being possessed through trauma, through half-remembered, ultra-violent, nightmarish memory scars. And then with Paran, he's just a fucking brat about it the whole time. And I say that in a lovingly way, a lovingly connotation to being a brat, kind of postmodern brat even. He's mad at everything. He's mad at every god. He's mad at his fucking sword sometimes. He's definitely mad at Empire for using him. I think part of him, in a meta way, is mad at the fucking author, mad at the fucking book for forcing him to conform to this chosen one archetype that he doesn't feel like conforming to. And yet he's forced to, because maybe it's all about predestination at the end of the day as well. Maybe it is fatalism, and fatalism can be a scary thing to the human condition, who thinks itself so free. The human experience likes to think of itself as a free one, as a spontaneous one. But what if it's anything but? How would you react to that? How would you react to that? Would you react to that like Lorne, through self-destruction? Or would you react to it like Absalar, in some sort of dream walking fog of revelation? Or would you respond to it like Paran? Would you be aggravated? Would you rebel at every turn? Would you try to reject the narrative everywhere that you go? Because that's what Paran did. And Paran still saw himself falling into the confines of genre. And also the confines of empire and gods. It might be inescapable. And that's like, there's so many interesting parts of this book. Even though I say that Paran is vital to the climax of this book and to most of its major points, it's because his body is being hijacked that he is vital. You could easily argue that he's an incredibly unhelpful primary protagonist, and you wouldn't be wrong. He's forced to be helpful by having his body hijacked by gods and his mind hijacked by empires. He doesn't really get to do anything that he actually wants to do. He doesn't get to fulfill every definition of his archetype. Like, he really wants to kill Lorne, doesn't even get close. There's so many things he can't do because his body's hijacked. As he's the chosen one, but he belongs to a narrative system that he can't even recognize. And that narrative system is Gardens of the Moon, and that narrative system turns him into a complete brat. But I think we took time out today to examine Paran in Gardens of the Moon, and I think we're walking away from it now with a rich and deeper understanding of autonomy, of Gardens of the Moon, and certainly of Captain Paran himself. Thank you so much for watching this video. I've had a lot of fun. I have a lot of fun with these Malazan videos. The next video I make will be about Dead House Gates, so get ready for that. I hope I'll say things that Malazan fans will continue to appreciate. But Gardens of the Moon, I think this one's unique. This one's really special. This one is probably the best thing, the best thing ever. So all hail Gardens of the Moon. Masterpiece.